You could see through it. That was the thing that stopped you cold in the hobby shop. Every other model on the wall was gray plastic or white plastic or olive drab plastic. But this one was clear. You could see the engine, you could see the cockpit, you could see the machine guns and the ammunition belts and the exhaust manifolds and every wire and strut inside a P-51 Mustang, all of it visible through transparent skin like an X-ray of the most beautiful airplane ever built. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. The Phantom Mustang, that's what Monogram called it, 1/32nd scale, released in 1961 for $1.98. You brought it home and opened the box, and the parts were unlike anything you'd ever seen. The body panels were crystal clear. The interior parts were molded in silver, black, red, and zinc chromate green, the actual colors of the real aircraft's guts, so you barely had to paint anything. You just assembled it, and when you were done, you had a see-through fighter plane sitting on a red plastic base that held 2 D-cell batteries and 2 electric motors. One button spun the propeller. Another raised and lowered the landing gear, main wheels and tail wheel, gear doors opening and closing, all of it powered by a tiny motor inside the fuselage. 2 levers on the base dropped bombs from the wings. You built it in a weekend, and then you sat there at your desk and pushed the buttons and pulled the levers and watched a World War II fighter come alive on your shelf for $1.98 in 1961. Nothing else came close. Not AMT with their car kits, not Revel with their catalog that went on forever, not MPC with their movie tie-ins. Monogram made kits that did things. The F3F had landing gear that retracted when you turned the propeller by hand. The B-52 had jet sound, an actual buzzing mechanism built into the base. Every kit in the line had some kind of action, some kind of motion, some reason to touch it after it was built. They weren't just models, they were machines that happened to be small. And the military kits were the heart of it. B-17 Flying Fortress, B-29 Super Fortress, B-36 Peacemaker, P-38 Lightning, F4U Corsair, USS Missouri. Every boy who cared about World War II, and in the 1960s that was most boys because their fathers had fought in it and their grandfathers had built the planes, built Monogram. You stood in the hobby shop and argued with your friends about which fighter was the greatest. The Mustang was the fastest, the Corsair was the meanest, the Spitfire was the prettiest, the Thunderbolt was the toughest. Nobody won the argument. Everybody went home and built the one they chose. You built it on the kitchen table or on your bedroom desk or on the floor of your room with the door closed and the radio on. You cut the parts from the sprue. You glued them with testers. You painted the cockpit and the wheel wells and the exhaust stains behind the engines. You applied the decals, white stars and blue circles, invasion stripes, serial numbers so small you needed a magnifying glass to read them. And when it was done, you set it on the shelf next to the others. Your squadron, your fleet, everyone a different plane, a different campaign, a different piece of a war you learned about through plastic and paint and the stories your father told when he was willing to tell them. The hobby shop had a hierarchy and you knew it. Lindbergh was on the bottom shelf, cheap, loose-fitting. The kits your mom bought you at the drugstore when she did not know the difference. Revel was in the middle, solid, reliable, enormous selection. But Monogram was on the top shelf. Not because it was more expensive, most kits were under $3, but because everyone knew. The detail was sharper, the parts fit tighter, the action features worked. When you brought a Monogram box to the counter, the man behind the register nodded differently. You were serious, you were buying the good stuff. Some of you saved for weeks to buy the B-17. It came in a long, flat box that barely fit under your arm. You carried it home and spread the parts across the entire table and just looked at them before you started. 4 engines, a ball turret, a top turret, waist gunners, a bombardier in the nose behind a sheet of clear plastic, landing gear that folded up into the nacelles. This was not a model. This was an education in engineering disguised as a toy, and it took you 2 weeks to finish it, and when you set it on the shelf with the propellers straight and the landing gear up and the decals perfectly placed, you felt something that no video game would ever give you, the knowledge that you made something real with your hands. Then in 1967, Monogram did something nobody expected. They hired a young designer named Tom Daniel and gave him a job that had no rules. Design a custom Mack truck. Make it wild. Make it something that doesn't exist. Daniel delivered the Beer Wagon, a fantasy show rod built on a Mack chassis with chrome stacks, gold trim, and enough attitude to fill a parking lot. It sold in the millions. Monogram looked at the numbers and said, "Do it again, do whatever you want." Daniel didn't need to be told twice. What came next was an avalanche of the most insane vehicles ever molded in plastic. The Red Baron, a hot rod with a World War I German Pickelhaube helmet mounted on the roof, an iron cross on the grille, and an attitude that belonged in no decade and every decade at once. It sold over 2 million kits. 2 million, the best-selling model car kit in history. The only model kit that ever outsold it was the Airfix Spitfire, and that was a British airplane, not an American hot rod with a Kaiser's helmet on its head. After the Red Baron came the Tijuana Taxi, the Paddy Wagon, the Ice-T, the School Bus. A school bus turned into a dragster with a blower sticking through the roof and flames painted down the sides. Cherry Bomb, Sand Crab, Thunderbug, Dragon Wagon, Tarantula, Pie Wagon, Roarin' Rail. None of them were real cars. None of them were based on real cars. Tom Daniel drew them from his imagination. Monogram molded them in plastic, and boys built them on kitchen tables all over America without once asking whether these vehicles could actually exist. They didn't need to exist. They were better than real. You had your favorite. Everyone had a favorite. Some of you were Red Baron boys. You built that hot rod 3 times because the first one you messed up and the second one wasn't good enough, and the third one was the one that stayed on the shelf. Some of you were Beer Wagon boys. You liked the Mack truck. You liked the chrome. You liked that it looked like something a man would drive, not a kid. Some of you were school bus boys because who doesn't want to turn something boring into something fast? You argued about them the same way you argued about the fighters. And just like with the fighters, nobody won and nobody cared because the whole point was having an opinion about something you built. And then Monogram did something that made the whole thing feel like a fever dream. They took the Red Baron, the drawing, the plastic kit, the fantasy that existed only in Tom Daniel's head and on a million boys' shelves, and they had a real one built. A full-size, working, drivable Red Baron hot rod constructed by Styline Customs in 1969 from the original design sketches. The helmet on the roof, the iron cross on the grille, the whole thing. A car that started as a sketch became a model kit that sold 2 million copies and then became a real car that you could sit in and drive. The circle closed. The fantasy became metal and rubber and exhaust smoke. A boy who had built the Red Baron on his desk could now see it at a car show, full-size, engine running, helmet gleaming. What started as a drawing ended as a machine. What started as a $2 kit ended as proof that imagination has horsepower. That was Monogram, a company that could make a see-through P-51 with working landing gear for $2 and then turn a designer's wildest dream into a full-size automobile because why not? Because the whole point of Monogram was that the kits weren't just kits. They were invitations to believe that the things you built with your hands could be real. Monogram was one of the big four. A MT made the Detroit cars, Mustang, GTO, Impala. Revell made everything. MPC made the licensed kits, Star Wars, Dukes of Hazzard, and Monogram made the war and the fantasy, the B-17s and the Beer Wagons, the P-51s and the Paddy Wagons. No other company occupied that space. No other company even tried. Jack Besser and Bob Reeder started it in Chicago in 1945. Two young men who had worked together at Comet Kits and decided they could do it better. Bob's wife, Bernice, gave it the name. One evening she said, "How about Monogram?" And it stuck because it sounded like what it was, a mark of identity, a sign of quality, something you put on things that matter. Bob traveled the country in his car, visiting hobby shops, running seminars, talking to builders. He was Monogram's face on the road the way Bud Anderson was AMT's. He believed that the company survived by knowing its customers, and he was right. Mattel bought Monogram in 1968. By 1984, they had given up on it and sold it at a loss. In 1986, Odyssey Partners bought both Monogram and Revell and merged them into Revell Monogram, moving all production to Monogram's plant in Morton Grove, Illinois. In 1994, Hallmark Cards bought the company. Yes, the greeting card people owned the company that made the Phantom Mustang. In 2007, Hobbico acquired it, and something happened that nobody announced and nobody protested, but everybody who cared about the name eventually noticed. The Monogram logo disappeared from the boxes, quietly, without ceremony. The kits were still made from the same molds, stamped from the same steel, and sold in the same hobby shops, but the name was gone. The mark of identity that Bernice Reeder suggested on an evening in 1945, the word that meant precision, action, and imagination to every boy who ever built a see-through airplane or a hot rod with a helmet, was simply removed, as if it had never been there. In 2018, Hobbico went bankrupt. The molds survived. They always survive. They're steel, and steel doesn't care who owns it, but the company that cut them, the people who designed them, the name on the box that told you this kit was going to be better than what you expected is gone. All four of the big four are gone now. AMT was absorbed after Lesney went bankrupt. Revell was swallowed in the merger. MPC disappeared into General Mills and then into nothing. And Monogram, the company that made a see-through Mustang, a 2 million selling hot rod, and a fleet of fantasy vehicles that existed nowhere except in the mind of one designer and on the shelves of 1 million boys, lost its name on a box in 2007, and nobody even made an announcement. But you remember the name, you remember the big M. You remember the see-through plastic under the lamp on your desk, the landing gear going up and down, the propeller spinning, the bombs dropping from the wings of a fighter plane you built with your hands for $1.98. You remember the Red Baron on the shelf next to the B-17, fantasy and history side by side, both of them yours, both of them Monogram. The name is gone. The mark of identity, the sign of quality, the word that Bernice said on an ordinary evening, it is not on anything anymore. But every kit you built with that name on the box is still somewhere, on a shelf, in a closet, in a box in the attic. And if you held one up to the light right now, you could still see through it. You could still see everything inside. That's what Monogram did. They let you see through things, and what you saw was worth building. If this brought something back, share it with someone who built beside you. Tell us in the comments, what was the first Monogram kit you ever built?